All right, guys, this is your coach, James Wilson, here with a first for us. This is my first webinar that I'm doing for you guys. And so a couple things with that. First, because this is my first webinar and I'm using a new system and all that, trying to get a few things going. It's probably going to be a few hitches here and there, but that's fine. We'll get through it. So anyways, in this webinar, what I wanted to do is go over the hip hinge, and specifically the hip hinge, and how we want to use it in the gym, and some common mistakes and how this applies to the bike. So I guess kind of jumping into it, if anybody has any questions or anything, you guys have the ability to ask them live in the chat room here if you're on this one live. But or before you do these, you can write in some questions, any questions you have, and I'll get to them. But anyways, moving on along with this, the what is the hip hinge? So the hip hinge is one of two lower body movement patterns that we need to have command of. And so basically, and this is what's going to make this so cool, is I get to jump up and show you guys the stuff as I'm talking about it. So with the hip hinge, there's two ways that we can move our lower body. We have a squat, and we have the hip hinge. And so really the best way to look at it is, what are we doing with our center of gravity? Our center of gravity is roughly around our hips. It's a little higher than that, but without getting too technical, we're looking at what's happening with our hips. We need to displace our hips either up and down or horizontally back and forth. And so with a squat, we want our butt to drop straight up and down. With a hip hinge, we want our butt to move horizontally. We want it to move forward and back. So I look at it as a horizontal displacement of your hips. And so it's just a really fancy way of saying I'm getting my hips to move back and forth, not up and down like this. And so again, you'll notice when I do a good hip hinge, my hips move down very little. There may be a little downward movement, but it's minimized. Whereas if I'm doing my squat, the hips are coming down a lot. And so that is your hip hinge. And so the main thing that you want to keep in mind with that is that it is our strongest movement, and that's why it's important that we have command of it. It uses the biggest, strongest muscles in our body. And so let's get this camera adjusted. This is one of those hitches I was talking about there. Get that down there. Excellent. Cool. So biggest, strongest muscles in our body. That's our glutes and our hamstrings. And so it's using these two muscles, the glutes and the hamstrings together, in order to create the movement. And so that's why it's such an important, powerful movement for us, both on and off of the bike. So just looking at it from a life standpoint, it's really important for us because the hip hinge is literally lifting with your legs and not your lower back. So I'm sure you've all heard to do that, but then no one actually showed you how to do it. And so you guys end up having to interpret in your own minds, well, how do I do that? And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of us start to interpret that to mean keep our chest upright. If our chest is upright, then it means that we're not using our lower back, which isn't necessarily right. But we end up doing something, when we're doing this, and so it's like the squatty, chest up thing, trying to, sometimes we'll come up on our toes if we need to, but we'll do whatever it takes to not bend over, because we equate bending over with using the lower back like that. But that's not it. Actually, to lift with your legs, not your lower back, you want to make sure that you're able to shift the hips back while keeping the lower back strong and stable. If the lower back's not moving, then you're not lifting with it. So really what we're looking at is not moving the lower back, not some like body position. You should be able to move your hips while maintaining a strong core without, having, in a bunch of different situations. So, and even this right here, just kind of touching on this, real common mistake, and I'm going to go over some common mistakes here in a minute when we go over how to do this in a little bit more detail. But one of the most common mistakes, things that I see, is this chest upright. People fight letting their chest come down to the ground. But again, the point is not to keep your chest up or some weird body position. It's to not move your lower back. It's to keep this strong and stable. So the hips move and the core connects your shoulders and your hips together. Now, if I push my butt back, but I force my chest to stay upright, I'm moving my lower back. I'm creating more of a curve and leaning back into my lower back. So I'm actually losing my core integrity to do that. So that is a bad way to lift, a bad way to move, and it translates onto the bike. Because again, we did in this like butt back and real high chest posture. And again, we'll get into why that's bad here in a little bit more here in a second. But the point is that you want to make sure that you're using the hips right and that you're keeping the lower back strong and stable. And so in the gym, we see this in the deadlift, the swing. There's a bunch of different unilateral, single leg variations and stuff of those exercises. But here in a second, we're going to get into a little bit more detail of how to do a good hip hinge and some common mistakes and stuff like that. And I'll show you guys some exercises that you can do with it. But so that's basically what the hip hinge is. It's the strongest move that your body has. If you were going to jump, you would do a hip hinge. That's the movement right there. That's your power move, your strongest move. If you're going to pick something up off of the ground, again, you watch kids, they get really good at doing their squat. If there's a ball or something on the ground, they'll if you squat down to check it out. But if you want to pick this thing up and it's heavy, you're going to have to get the hips up and use the hips to help leverage yourself up. So it's really, really, really important that you have command of this movement, just in general, off of the bike as well, just because, like I said, it's going to protect your lower back. Anytime you're picking something up off the ground, this is something I really try to drill into people, my clients' head when I work with them, is once I show you how to do a hip hinge, that's how I want to see you pick things up and put things down. It's not an exercise. Doing a deadlift is not an exercise. It's a chance to practice the hip hinge. And so you should be doing a hip hinge like a deadlift anytime you're picking something up and putting it back down, especially in the gym. So, just something to keep in mind is these life skills that we're practicing, and then they apply to the bike. But remember, you had this hip hinge. If you have trouble with it, you had it at one point. As children, we had the hip hinge. We had command of it. We just start to lose it as we get older. And then when we lose that hip hinge, that primal movement pattern, we find it harder to learn and progress our skills on our bike. And so that's what we're going to move into now. So real quick, I just got some notes over here on my screen that I'm using to keep myself on track here. So, all right. So looking at how to do a hip hinge. So whenever I'm coaching an exercise, I look at three things, and really it's just this simple. I'm telling you guys all my secrets right here. I look at the feet, the hips, and the shoulders. Any exercise that you do, any movement that you do, if you look at those three areas, if they're doing what they need to do, if they're in a good position, then everything else is going to be lined up as well. And so just paying attention to those three areas is going to really boil things down and really help you focus in on the causes of the good movement, not the symptoms of it. You can, the symptoms are all these other little things that line up when the main things are doing what they need to do. But if you focus on trying to make all these little things line up and look a certain way, you can miss the main things that we want to. And so that's what I'm going to do, is show you guys the main things to focus on to make it really easy for you to get more out of your hip hinges, to learn these exercises more effectively, and then also to be able to apply this stuff to the bike more effectively. So the first thing is the feet. Everything starts with the feet. Now, with the feet, we want to be balanced, okay? I want to have be balanced between the ball of my feet and my heel. I may have a little bit more weight back on my heel, but I don't want a ton of weight back on my heel. In fact, that's one of the common mistakes that people make, is they put way too much weight on the back, on their heels. And so they'll end up, the balls of their feet will become unweighted. And when they're doing the exercise, you'll see their feet actually start to come off of the ground. They have all the weight on the heels. And that's a mistake. That's not what you want to do. Now, if you have a problem with weight shifting to your toes, then, saying, well, lightly lift your toes off the ground, or try to keep your toes off the ground, will help keep that from happening. But what happens is people take this advice too far. They really lift the toes, and they think the whole point is to, keep the ball of the foot light and keep all the way back on the heel. That's not what we want. We want balance on the feet. So on the feet, you've got 3 contact points. You got the ball of the foot, you got the outside edge of the foot, and you got your heel. And so those 3 points form a triangle, and you want that, triangle to be strong and stable and solid with the ground. So, if the outside edge of your foot is coming off of the ground, you're going to see your arch collapse. If your heel's coming off of the ground, you're going to feel your weight shift to your toes. Again, if you can feel the weight shift to the inside of the foot if your arch comes up. If you get the ball of the foot up too much, or the big toe knuckle comes off the ground, that's the real common one. If you raise the toes off of the ground too much, you'll see the foot kind of start to roll to the outside like this a little bit. And that's not what we want. We want that big toe knuckle, the outside edge of the foot, and the heel really strong and planted into the ground. And so you want to make sure that you've got that going on with your feet and keeping that there. Honestly, so much of all the stuff that goes up here, and you're like, man, I gotta fix this, I gotta fix that. If you just figure out how to make the movement happen while maintaining your balance on your feet and not feeling it move and shift and all that, so much of this works out and irons itself out. Just make sure that you're balanced on your feet and you stay balanced. That's where it all starts. So feet, there you go. Start with the feet. The next thing I look at is the hips. And so when you're doing your hip hinge, you want to make sure that you're feeling the tension in the glutes and the hamstrings. You don't want to feel tension in the lower back or in the quads. So you want it to look like this. When I'm down in this position here, I feel my butt cheek and the top of my hamstring tight and loaded. Okay? If I do this wrong and I come down and I do this like trying to force my chest to stay upright, glute, I feel a lot of pressure here in my lower back. This is no good. If I come down and I shift my knees forward, this is another common mistake, is that somewhere along the line, we start to squat down. As soon as I do this, I can feel, 1, I feel the weight shift in my feet forward, and 2, I feel the tension shift to my quads. This is not what we want. So again, if I'm focusing on weight on my feet and where the tension is right here, I automatically know I'm in a bad position because my weight is shifted forward and I'm feeling the tension in the wrong area. If I just figure out how to come down while keeping the weight even on my feet, nice and balanced on my feet, and I feel the tension loading in my glutes and my hamstrings, I know that I look right. I don't have to worry about what I look like from the outside if those things are feeling the way that they need to. Because if it feels right, it'll look right. If I'm trying to make it look right, I can totally miss the feeling. And so, again, focusing on these easy things. This is the way that makes this stuff a lot easier for you to learn and a lot easier for you to apply to the gym and on the bike and stuff. It's focusing on these feelings in these key areas, not every little minor detail of how you look from the outside necessarily. So again, you can use that stuff to dial things in, but that's not the main focus that we want to have. So, so again, that's it with the hips. Loading here now. Another common mistake that I see is people tend to tip over instead of push the hips back. And so again, if you're focusing with the weight on your feet, you'll feel like, wait a minute, this isn't right, this isn't what I want. But people get away with this for a while, especially when they're doing swings and they can use the weight to kind of counterbalance them. And what they'll do is they'll just tip over like this. And so this doesn't look too bad. My lower back isn't moving and I'm feeling a stretch in my hamstrings right here. So it kind of looks and feels the same. But again, 2 things are off here. If you're paying attention to your feet, I've already mentioned this tipping motion right here. What you'll notice is my butt doesn't push back. So remember, a hip hinge is not just bending over. I don't want to just tip over. I want to move. I want to displace my center of gravity backwards. And so my butt has to move backwards like that behind my heels in order for this to be a hip hinge. So just tipping over where my butt stays over my feet or moves back just a little bit, you see how my shoulders come out in front of my toes. This is not the same thing. You see how my shoulders stay more over my toes, my butt pushes back. So 2 things happen here, like I've already mentioned 2 or 3 times. My feet, Can't say that enough. Pay attention to balance on your feet. You know, that's your first warnings a lot of times if something else is out of whack. But right here, I feel my weight staying balanced, and I'm also feeling the tension in my butt cheeks. Again, that's a real common thing. When I get people doing the hip hinge right, they'll comment that they're starting to feel the stretch and the tension in their butt more. And so when you just tip over, you'll get it in the hamstring. It's like a hamstring stretch. But when you push the butt back, now I get it in here. My butt and my hamstrings are working together to do this. So again, focusing on your feet and on your hips, and you know, where that tension is going to really help you dial in your form. You know, worry about how you look, worry about how it feels, and it'll do what you want it to do. So shoulders, that's the third area I look at. Start with the feet, then I look at the hips, then I look at the shoulders. So the shoulders, there's a couple things that I'm looking for. The shoulders are a funny area because different coaching cues work for different people. And so I like to get one coaching cue and just think about it. But unfortunately, everyone's a little different with this one. So the idea with your shoulders, most of us have this forward rounded shoulder posture. Now, pulling your shoulders back and down is a common piece of advice to help you get into a good spot. But the problem is, if I take this too far and I keep pulling back and down, I start to get in a bad position. I don't want my chest puffed out right here. I'm starting to lose my core integrity, all of this stuff. So really what I want is I want my shoulders and my collarbone wide. I want to think about tucking my shoulder blades into my back pockets, and I want a wide chest. I want my collarbones wide. I want my shoulders wide. Now again, when I do that, you'll feel the upper back engage. You feel the lats engage. It almost feels like you're, you know, a bodybuilder on stage doing your lat spreads, trying to show off your lats or whatever. But you'll feel that muscle in there get strong and tight. You'll feel the muscles in your upper back get strong and tight. You feel your shoulders pulled down and away from your ears. And so, you know, that tucking the shoulder blades into the back pockets and getting the shoulders wide, that's where we want the shoulders to be. And we want to learn how to move while maintaining this basic position. So what I don't want is a lot of tension here in the chest, in the shoulders, and the neck. There's a very distinct feeling to when you get this upper back nice and strong, and it's holding your shoulders in place, and you're not relying on your neck and your chest to act as a part of your core. So again, when we're doing our hip hinge, I want to make sure I'm keeping a good shoulder position. So as I come down, my shoulders stay in the same position as they do at the top. Now, a common mistake with this is that as people come down, they'll lose it. They'll round the shoulders. And, you know, part of it is they just don't think about it. We think about the exercises that usually work the hip hinge, like the deadlift and the swing. You know, those are leg exercises. So we're just focusing on what's going on from here down. We're not thinking about the rest of us, which is, you know, it's a unit where the whole body is involved here. So you have to make sure you're thinking about that upper back as well. And another problem is that because everything's connected, all the muscles are connected through the fascial sheath and all that stuff, when you get slack in one area, it gives you slack in another as well. So if you're tight in your hips and you reach a point where you're tight, if you relax the shoulders, that creates slack in the system. And now you have a little more slack for your hips to slide further back. And so it gives you the false sense of mobility to compromise your shoulder position and your upper body position in order to shift your hips back. And so we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that and not doing that, because it's not it's just bad for our shoulders, and it starts to mess up our ability to corner and steer effectively. So I'm going to get into that here in just a second as I start to touch on, well, how the hell does all of this apply to the bike? The last thing that I want to touch on is the top. The top position is very important. So I've talked about, you know, coming down and how it should feel at the bottom position. You know, balance on the feet, tension in the glutes and the hamstrings, you know, not in the quads and the low back, making sure you're keeping tension in the upper back, the shoulder blades tucked and the collarbones or shoulders wide, and not letting the tension come up into your neck and your traps and chest and stuff. So that's how it should feel at the bottom. Now, how should it feel at the top? The top is pretty simple. We want to pull the kneecaps high. Okay, that'll get the quads nice and strong. We want to squeeze the butt cheeks together. We want to get tall and thin through the core. That tall and thin is a really important cue. You want to pretend like you're trying to button a pair of pants that's sizes too small. You're trying to get tall and thin. And we don't want to suck the belly in like we're, trying to, it's more of a bracing, but that tall and thin sensation will get you where you want to be. You want to be tall and thin, good strong core, and we want to be keeping the shoulder blades tucked, wide, shoulders, wide collarbone. So that's it. That's what we're going to be looking at the top. So putting this together, I'll show you guys. Grab one of my kettlebells here. I'll just show you a couple in action here. So again, I'm balanced on my feet. When you're doing these, you want the bar or the weight in close towards you. The further out away from you it is, the more you're going to have to use your lower back to lift it up. So if you're doing like a kettlebell deadlift, you want to make sure it's between your feet. If you're doing a barbell deadlift, you want to make sure it's pulled all the way in, close to your shins. But anyway, so got my feet set. I'm going to come down, keeping myself balanced on my feet, feeling the glutes and the hamstrings load, keeping my chest and my shoulders in a good strong position, finding the weight. I'm going to come up. I'm going to push up, pull the kneecaps high, squeeze the glutes, tall and thin at the top, shoulders stay in a good strong spot. And come back down. Now, when I push up, there's a cue to drive through your heels, and I like that cue. Driving through the heels is a good one, but you don't want to take it too far. Again, remember the balance on the feet. Realistically, you're going to be driving and applying force more through the arch, more through like the mid-foot, than actually trying to drive all of your weight into your heels. So again, it's one of those cues that can really help you get into the right spot, but if you take it too far, it starts to mess up your mechanics. So anyways, I think about trying to push the ground away from me. I'm not standing up, I'm pushing the ground, pushing the earth away from me, and that helps me get my feet and everything to engage like I want to. So again, if you're down in this position here, you've got the tension here, this is the tension. You're then going to squeeze this tighter to drive you back out of the hole. And if you're doing that, the tension in your feet, if you're balanced on your feet and you're using your hips, a lot of times where you're driving through the foot is going to take care of itself. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that because it's one of those cues that I find confuses people. But anyway, so at the bottom, driving up, tall and thin at the top. Another thing I'll think about is trying to get the top of my head as close to the ceiling as I can. So what I don't want to do is come up and lean back. Again, real common, but if we think tall and thin through the core, we think about trying to get the top of our head as close to the ceiling as we can. That'll keep you from leaning back, because you can't be tall and thin and have your head towards the top of the ceiling if you're leaning back. So that'll help spare your lower back as you're doing these. So this applies to any of the stuff. If we're doing, shows you the deadlift there. Bulgarian goat back swing is one of my favorites for learning this, holding the weight here and doing your hip hinge. Again, really working that upper back. It's really tough to keep that upper back in a strong position with this, and that's what we want. So you got to keep that in mind. Bulgarian goat back swing. We do our regular deadlift. We do our swings. All of it, you'll see, is that same movement pattern. It's the hip hinge. I can do single leg variations. Whatever it is, if it's a hip dominant, a hip hinge dominant movement, this is how you do it. And again, once you understand how the feet, the hips, and the shoulders should feel during this movement pattern, it makes it really easy to apply this movement pattern almost instinctively to all sorts of new exercises and movements. And so that's what we're going to get into here right now. Is I'm going to move my notes along to How does it apply to the bike? So it's actually pretty simple. I'm a big believer that when it comes to bike skills, if you have the prerequisite movements, kind of the primal movement skills, if you will, if you have those things in place, a lot of the bike skill stuff comes so much easier because you're not having to think about how do I overcome my lack of movement. You just understand, like, this is how I apply my movement to these different situations, whether it's a new exercise or whether it's, you know, on your bike or whatever. So so how does this all apply to the bike? Well, basically it should feel the same way at the bottom of your deadlift as you do in the attack position on your bike. So when you're on your bike and you're, you know, if I had a bike, I'd jump on it and show you guys right now. Maybe I'll work on that here in the future. But get on your bike, right, sitting on pedals. I'm in my attack position. This point right here should feel just like the bottom of my deadlift, okay? I'm balanced on my feet. This is a reason that I don't like, again, you don't want to push the ball of your foot when you pedal. This was a mistake that was made when people originally were looking at the pedal stroke saying, hey, that's like running or walking. And since you push the ball of your foot when you run or walk, you want to do it when you pedal. But what they missed was that your foot does not break contact with the ground. Basically, the pedal, what your foot is in contact with is, for all intents and purposes, the ground. And since your foot doesn't break contact with the ground, it never breaks contact with the pedal, you know, at least hopefully not on accident. You know, when you're pedaling, you don't want your foot breaking contact with the pedal. And so your foot acts much differently when it doesn't break contact with the ground and you're moving than it does if you are breaking contact. So if I'm doing a squat or deadlift, it doesn't break contact with the ground. I want to drive through my middle of my foot. I want to be balanced on my foot. If I am, you know, jumping or walking or running or whatever, my foot breaks contact with the ground. It comes off the ground. That's when I want to push through the ball of my foot. And so, but that's not what's happening on the bike. So we don't want to be on the ball of our foot. We don't want to push the ball of our foot. You use your hips more effectively when you are at that midfoot position. In fact, there was a study someone passed along to me that showed that the midfoot and the ball of the foot position, they didn't show any difference in power and stuff like that. But, you know, and so it was basically saying, like, see, what's the big deal? Who cares? What's funny is they did mention that the power was coming more from the hips at the midfoot position, and you weren't putting as much stress on the ankle and the calf as you were in the ball of the foot position. So that right there is, you know, I want to use my hips. It's the biggest, strongest muscle in my body. I can use my hips more effectively from that midfoot position. So when you have your foot in the midfoot position and you're balanced, then you're going to be able to sit back into your hips more effectively and use them more effectively on the bike. And so you want to be balanced on your feet. You don't want to feel like you have a lot of weight on the balls of your feet. So if you're wearing clipless pedals, this means you're going to have to move your cleats back, maybe even buy an adapter that allows you to move into a midfoot position, because it's really tough to get that position with most clipless pedals. If you're on flats, it just means moving your foot more forward. You want the axle more under the arch of the foot than under the ball of the foot. That's a better position for it to be. It's going to be more balanced. So again, you know, I want to shift my hips back. I can't do that. Like dropping my heels is not the same thing as being balanced on my feet and being able to shift my hips back. Okay, if I'm trying to stand on my toes, I can't shift you see, I'm unbalanced. It's really tough to do. So yeah, maybe I can drop my heels, but again, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as having your feet balanced and being able to move your hips effectively like you want to. You want to be able to move your hips, and yeah, if my heels drop some as my hips shift back, that's fine. That's a lot different than trying to, you know, drop the heels to initiate the whole thing because my feet are unbalanced. So anyways, there you go, feet, you want to balance on your feet. Hips, same thing. When I'm in this attack position, I should feel like this is holding me up. I shouldn't feel like my quads are holding me up. I definitely shouldn't feel my lower back tension. So, you know, again, if I'm trying to come like this and feel a ton of tension in the lower back, none of that is good. Upper back position, shoulders tucked in the back pockets, shoulders nice and wide. Now, one of the side effects of this is it's going to put your arms in the right position. And I'm not a big fan of the elbows out coaching cue. It results in a lot of what I call the scarecrow position. You got a ton of riders out there with their elbows pushed all the way out to 90, even some like past 90, and it's because, hey, elbows out, that's how I'm supposed to do it. So they take it to this extreme, and they look like a scarecrow hanging up there. But anyways, point is, we don't want elbows out. We want a strong upper back. Now, if my upper back is weak and not engaged, my elbows can flop in like this. This isn't what I want. What I want is my shoulder blades tucked, my shoulders nice and wide, those lats engaged. I didn't move my elbows. I did not push my elbows out. My shoulder blades and my shoulders getting in the right position put my elbows here. You see, it's literally impossible for me to get my elbows all the way in unless I disengage my lats. So, but I can push my elbows out and not engage my lats. That's not what I want. I want my lats engaged. I want my upper back engaged. That's what I want. That will put my elbows in the right spot. So don't push your elbows out. Get your upper back strong and in the right spot, and your elbows will be in the right position. So, and again, when we're touching on cornering real quick, when you're in this position right here, you want to be able to use counter pressure effectively while you're to corner. So if I let my shoulders, so I want to be able to push like this. If my shoulders round up, when I push, it changes the angle of my push, right? It makes it less effective. So for me to be able to push at this angle still, right? Naturally, it's going to do that. Now I have to kind of change what's happening. It messes up your shoulders, it messes up your stability, it messes all of that up. If you have your shoulders in a bad position, it makes it really tough to corner effectively and use counter pressure effectively. And so, anyways, just something to keep in mind with that. So that's the three main things: your feet, your hips, and your shoulders. When you do this right, a couple cues that will help you. Again, don't focus on making this happen. Focus on getting in the right position and then check this. But if you're in the right position, generally your chin will end up over your stem. Okay, so when I'm down in this position here, my chin will be over my stem. And as I come up, if I'm going to stand up to pedal, my chin will stay over my stem. I may shift that forward. That's kind of a good neutral-ish position. Now, when I say neutral, remember, when you're on the bike, you need some weight on the front end. So what I think about is spreading my weight out over the bike. Again, this is one of the reasons that just tipping over like this is not what we want to do. We want to push the butt back. This is what spreads our weight out. This pushes our butt back behind the bike center of gravity while letting our shoulders come down and put some pressure and weight on the front end. Because you have to have weight on the front end. You can't steer effectively if you have no weight on the front end. So you want to make sure that you have some weight on the bike. What you want is pressure on the palm right along here. This is a little tricep trigger point. When you have pressure here, it helps the triceps engage better. So we want we want pressure right here with the handlebar. And that is one of my tips for a good body position. If I'm leaning back, I'm going to feel pressure on my fingers. I know I've got my weight too far back. If I'm leaning real hard into it and I feel too much weight on my hands, then I know I need to back off a little bit. But that pressure and weight on the front end and getting yourself spread out over the bike, that's the goal. And that's what the hip hinge and getting good command of the hip hinge is going to do for you on the bike. Is it's going to make it so much more easy for you to apply that on the bike and be able to spread your weight out and not end up in one of these compromised positions, which unfortunately this is what's happening. A lot of riders don't have a good hip hinge. They're trying to learn good body position and they can't spread their weight out effectively. And so you end up with too much weight back and they can't steer effectively, or their shoulders are out of position, or they're fighting letting their chest come down, or just one of these really common things that you see people struggle with. And then if you don't have body position down, I already touched on how basic body position goes into cornering. I mean, if you don't have good body position down and your shoulders are rounded up too much, that really changes how you're able to apply pressure into the handlebars, which changes your ability to steer in corners effectively. So body position can't be overstated. You have to have really good body position to be able to execute these other skills. In fact, 9 times out of 10, when someone's struggling with a higher level skill like quartering or something like that, man, I look at their body position, it's just like, look, man, I know you can do this in a parking lot, you know, under controlled conditions, but you don't really have command of it. You're not focusing on this stuff in the gym with your strength training. You're not spending time on the trail focusing on how to apply this stuff on the bike. And so, again, it's these movements apply across the board. Every time that you bend down to pick something up off of the ground, you're practicing the same movement pattern that you need for this body position. So it's a chance for you to practice body position in a roundabout way. And so, yeah, when you understand how these things connect, you know, in life, in the gym, and on the bike, and you see one, you start to identify where your gaps are, and then how to fill those gaps, and you reestablish these primal movement patterns, then it's going to make your skill acquisition and all these other things on the bike so much easier. And it's going to improve your endurance as well. So this is one of these things, like, you know, we're always worried about cardio and improving the size of our gas tank, but another way, actually more effective way to improve your endurance is to get more efficient. So if you're burning fewer calories, if you're using less energy, you're going to be able to make better use of the gas tank that you already have. And so by, you know, improving your movement efficiency, by improving your hip hinge and being able to use it more effectively on the bike, you're going to improve your efficiency and your balance, and you're going to expend less energy on the bike, and it's going to improve your endurance. So, you know, all of this stuff connects together. You know, you just have to know, you know, focus on your gaps, fill those, and it makes all this higher level stuff easier. So, so anyway, so that's it. I'm just gonna take one more look at my notes and make sure that I went over everything. And yeah, I think that's it. So, all right, so that's gonna do it for this webinar. Go ahead and wrap it up now. But yeah, hopefully you guys got some good information out of it. I had a lot of fun doing it. You know, like I said, I like this new format. I think it has a lot to offer. So I'll be looking to do another one of these next month. Remember too, if you want to have me personally help you apply this stuff, I still have some openings in my Primal Skills Camp. I've got one the first week of September and one the first week of October. And so if you're interested in that, shoot me an email at james@bikejames.com, and I can get you the details on that and the sign up link. But yeah, I expect them to fill up. So you know, if you're interested, definitely let me know. But again, all I'm, you know, it's getting you in, breaking you down, showing you this stuff, personally helping you fix, you know, the gaps that you have in your primal movement patterns, and then showing you how to apply that stuff to the bike so that you can pick the stuff up faster. And really, that's what it's all about. So even doing, you know, just in the gym, mobility, whatever you're doing, man, just make sure you're keeping the stuff in mind. So, all right, well, that's it. I'm gonna wrap up now before I just keep on rambling for a few more minutes. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will talk to you guys next time.